So you may wonder why this is just follows is just a brief connect the dots kind of thing. It's because the public today wants things quick. And this is a fast foods presentation of what's coming down in your neighborhood and how you're going to get fleeced very quickly and soon. And getting fleecing the citizens is the end result of this process that follows. So this is just a connect the dots fast food presentation for the public today's environment. This video, this video made August 27th, 2019, is about the movers and shakers behind the economic developments and related developments that they cause that you're unaware of until you watch this video, and primarily stems from the Rothschilds and their octopus-like tentacles that reach to the central banks of so-called central banks of other countries around the world as they try to control the economies, the commodities, the forex exchange, the bonds, the stock markets, the etc., through their extensive network. Of essentially their employees, who are really figureheads. The Rothschilds and their behind-the-scenes influence, they try to keep as secret as possible. Meanwhile, people like J.P. Morgan and others, Trump and others who are basically doing their work and creating circumstances so that the essentially the Interbank, who are composed of the central for-profit, they call themselves central banks in the nations they're in. For instance, the U.S., the Federal Reserve Bank, it is in fact a for-profit private corporation that makes its money by printing money and buying U.S. treasuries, thereby diluting the money supply. And so they can regulate the U.S. economy by contracting or expanding the amount of money in circulation. It is a for-profit. They make money by printing dollar bills, essentially, and loaning them, quote, loaning them to the federal government, and then charging the federal government interest on the money they just loaned them, which they in fact just printed and don't have anything in reality. They've concocted something and passed this by the Congress and other nations, and they say it's a central bank as though it is a part of the federal government, which it is not. It is a for-profit private corporation. And Interbank is composed of some of these central banks, these private corporations that are regulating the economy, making it go through business cycles and profiting. When the business cycle goes up, they have bought securities, etc., and they at the top they take profits, and they then concoct circumstances to take the economy in the other direction after they've shorted positions and various things and take it back down. And so they do this throughout. And of course, they murder and kill people who get in their way. This particular video puts me at great risk, and but just the same, they're responsible for tens and hundreds of millions of people's death just because of their greed. Just because of their greed. So anyway, so yeah, the following you'll see is a very brief composite to take you very quickly through the thread of the development of what has happened with the Rothschilds and how they have faded into anonymity. Meanwhile, installing private corporations named as central banks in various countries around the world, and how their tentacles reach out through Interbank and Forex trading and the IMF and just more of the same of basically making money off other countries' misfortunes by getting them in trouble, loaning money out to them and that they print that they didn't have. And it's just a smokescreen, a way that they have muscled these regulations into various countries' constitutions. And so these various countries have accepted this in the guise of stabilized currency, when in fact these interbank people originating from the Rothschilds, who are present but behind the scenes actively every day, are creating instability, and the interbank central banks are profiting because they know what's happening, because they're controlling it. And if you look into this video and you see what's happening, you'll see how it's done, why it's done, who's doing it, and what the repercussions are. All this should be obvious when you get through. It's going to seem like a conspiracy theory right now in your minds. It's going to seem like unbelievable. One family can't possibly be responsible for doing all this. And as you'll see, in each circumstance, there'll be one figurehead, whether it's Conley or Brickner or you name it, J.P. Morgan, who appear to be a mover and shaker. But in reality, they are setting up circumstances. And if you look at not the money trail, but the value trail, because there'll be a transfer of value from citizens. These people, Rothschilds, and these figureheads of these Rothschilds are preying off citizens. And the way they prey off the citizens to get the citizens' money is they create government programs, and the government borrows this fictitious ghost money from the interbank central banks that are set up, that are private corporations. And the terms of the loan, quote, loan, ghost loan money to the U.S. government or the governments is the stipulation that the citizens will pay for it. And through the silent or secret tax, as the money supply is diluted, it siphons off, quote, silently, but if you follow the value trail, in other words, the currency appears to lose value. It loses purchasing power, yes, but the value that has disappeared has not disappeared. It has gone into the pipeline, as I refer to it as a siphon. It is set up deliberately to siphon the money, the purchasing power out of each and every dollar bill that's held around the world in this ghost-like manner. And the citizens don't know about it. The citizens can't do anything about it unless they know about it. And the people in government believe that things are being done for economic stability. There's a huge smokescreen because the public press doesn't know, isn't aware of it. This is a century-old technique that has been evolved through hundreds of years by the Rothschilds and their sons and their tentacles that reach out into They're trying to get into every fabric of every country. And of course, they're having a real problem with China right now, which is why it's a West versus East, because the East is going to come into preeminence now, and the Western bankers don't like it. They would love to get a central bank of theirs installed in China and regulate what's happening in China for their profit. So what recently has the central banks, of course, they're involved in the IMF and all those problems with third world countries making money off those people, where the third world developing countries are paying more in interest than they are in their debt. And so look at what has happened in Zimbabwe with their hyperinflation and the crash that was manufactured there in Argentina. And if you look at the documentary in Argentina, you see how they were gutted. And then Venezuela now in the process. And the United States is now next on the list. Look at the siphon that was installed by Nixon. Nixon didn't think of it. Connally was there. Of course, he was an agent from Representative's figurehead to get the fiat currency installed and to deal with the gold standard at that time and set the U.S. on the course of hyperinflation. Of course, the Interbank knew with the installation of the fiat currency that there was going to be an inflation and expansion of the money supply, which would contribute to the growth of the stock market and other borrowing. And you see what has happened since 1972 to the stock market. And you see the evaporation of value that has gone out of the purchasing power of the dollar and has gone into government spending, which is the siphon going into taking the value out of the dollar, going into the interbank pockets. Just look up the trail. You can see the trail of value very clearly. The evaporated, people think the time and again, press says, well, the value has just evaporated out of the dollar. Yeah, well, remember that if you take the evaporated contents of a glass of water and you give it the appropriate condition, that water vapor condenses right into somebody else's pocket. And this analogy is absolutely accurate about what has happened. That's why instead of following a money trail, follow the value that has, quote, evaporated. See where that has condensed through the various programs and the spending and of the U.S. government and other governments, same way. And so basically, with the expansion of the money supply caused by the Federal Reserve, the private corporation, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the U.S. stock market, the Interbank has been making tremendous amounts of money off the increase in prices in the stock market. And at the same time, the dilution of the dollar has caused a severe drop in the value of the forex exchange of the U.S. dollar relative to the Swiss franc. Of course, where the Swiss franc originates from Switzerland, where the Rothschilds and all these other moneyed interest interbank have their headquarters set up for some centuries now. All right, so there it is. Follow the trail. And so they're setting the U.S. up now to take down the U.S. They've got a tremendous amount of the U.S. people's finances into the U.S. dollar. They're about to take the citizens' money away from them. They've been doing it little by little with the devaluation of the dollar relative to the Swiss franc. But as you see in the last 10, 15 years, that has stabilized. But the U.S. stock market has continued to grow. The people have been putting more and more money into the stock market. Interbank is families are getting ready to fleece the value out of the citizens, always out of the citizens. It's smokescreen to say the government this or the government that program, the government debt. No, the government debt is a reflection of the fleecing that is about to take place of the citizens. The citizens are the ones who have the money in any population, not the government. The government their money has been taken out a long time ago, out of the government. The final extraction of wealth of a country comes from the citizens. And the U.S. is now being set up for the final fleecing of its citizens, and it's going to go into hyperinflation. The stock market is going to come down, not necessarily as a crash into a depression. It's going to come down because the Interbank is now shorting positions and in all manner of, there's stocks, there's commodities, there's bonds, there's and so on, Forex, and they are already taking up positions in these areas. And when there's going to be a trigger that's going to escalate this, and Trump is a good example of setting it up. You're now seeing Trump is their front runner, and he's he's going to be a figurehead here, and people aren't going to pay attention that the Interbank families are behind this, and they're already taking up positions, and China's giving a real problem. The West has tried to take down the East before, the Opium Wars with England and France and the United States, all part of the family Rothschilds trying to siphon the wealth out of China. And as you know, England forced the legality of opium in China during the Opium Wars, to the devastation of China. And so now the awakening of China, the West is Interbank. People are extremely concerned about the hegemony of they quote, hegemony of China, because the Rothschilds, I don't really think the English citizens are concerned about the rise of China. China's rise, technology is creating great wealth and innovation and solutions and technological advances for the rest of the world. But Interbank, Rothschilds, can't get central banks in there. And the Rothschilds are going to lose their preeminence in the financial world if China continues on its course. And that is what Trump is doing. As you see, many other countries in the world are doing end runs around Trump's isolationism, because Trump is trying to stop dragging on the coattails of China to try and stop their progress, so that the Rothschilds and Interbank can get in there and control China's economy, because there's a tremendous amount of wealth now in the citizens within China. Their savings rate is like 45% of their GDP. I mean, it's a phenomenal amount of wealth there. And, the Rothschilds or Interbank family relationships there, they're salivating the amount of wealth that they can get their hands on there. And so Trump he's going to try to do his best to create some kind of entry into the Chinese market and get some kind of a central bank and some kind of influence with these Interbank family members in there to set up things eventually to siphon off the wealth out of the citizens. As they've set the U.S. up now, and the U.S. citizens are primed. They've got their savings and everything in the stock market, and the stock market is 25,000 or so. Phenomenal rise, And you know, and so when the events get triggered, the interbank folks are going to take the U.S. down in their hyperinflation, just like Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuela, the inevitable, their calendar march of taking down one country after another, and stop thinking of it as a country. Thinking of it, they fleeced the citizens. That's where the final wealth came from. They took the money, if you see what happened, they took the money out of the governments, the central governments, long before they fleeced the citizens. The fleecing of the citizens was the last and final straw to extract the last bit of wealth out of the country. And they're going to do it in the United States in a fairly short period. I estimate between 2022 and 2027, as I said before, kind of a range. It looks like they're getting ready. This thing with Trump, it looks like he's going to start resolving trade conflicts coming up to his reelection. They would really, central banks would really like to see him, Interbank, see him get reelected to continue to try to take down China or get there. They don't really want to take down China. Actually, they want to create problems with China so that President Xi and the CPC will allow Western banks to come in and set up some kind of shop so they can influence and eventually get into and convince members of the CPC that a central bank is useful for regulating the currency and their economy, like they've done in other countries around the world. And so that's part of the trade talks that are not being publicized, that behind the scenes, Western powers, these interbank, are very worried about a weak Chinese yuan or RMB, because it popularizes the use of the Chinese currency, which is the interbank folks, they want their influence to be preeminent. So this is a complicated thing that's happening because Trump is losing popularity, and he may well not win in 2020, which will create a major stumbling block for the interbank folks trying to get in their influence into China and weave into the fabric of the CPC and establish a private central bank there. At this point, I'm not sure that they've been able to do this. There's so many countries around the world. They go in, of course, they remove people through their interbank, removes people through their political contributions, through their murder, through their extortion, blackmail, all kinds of any way that they can get into threatening to cause problems. If with the legislature, threatening, they'll cause problems and they'll cause wars, which they have done to bring the legislature of country to their knees. They don't go to the citizens. The citizens know what's going on. The interbank folks go to the legislative bodies to intimidate, buy off, murder, whatever they can need to do, intimidate, to get it written into the Constitution that they will get a private corporation set up under the guise name of Central Bank of said country. And then it's set. That's all the Interbank cares about, because then they can regulate the economy and do their seesaw of pumping money, cycle up, cycle down, cycle up, cycle down, expand, contract the money supply. That's all they want. It's just like bellows in a furnace, forge. It's just, and that's all they care about. You read what the Interbank Rothschilds say. That's all they care about. Let us let us into your country and set up. And we don't care who the politicians are. We don't care what the political systems are. We don't care about anything. That's all we care about, and that's good for us, and we'll be satisfied. And that's it. And that's their sole goal. It's just greed, fleecing the citizens. Stop. It's just a smokescreen of theirs to get people focused on the government, etc., the legislature. Yeah, the legislature let these people in, but it's all for fleecing the citizens. It's all for fleecing the citizens of the world, of each country, one by one. Well, sometimes simultaneously, depending on what their sons and relatives can carry out, according to the timetable within each country, in order to first extract the money out of the government and then to go in, set up the central bank, that quote, central corporation for profit, and fleece now concentrate on extracting the wealth out of the citizens' pockets. Anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell. The following video is going to show a brief connect the dots. These are just going to be dots, and you can connect them yourself. If you want to do so, you can look into this. Anyway, without further ado, here it comes.